Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning. A warm welcome to you wherever you are in the world. My name's Simon Hurst, and I'm here with my colleague Steve Orkett from Xoomworks, and also Sophie Pope from IASTA, who are a close partner of Xoomworks. The subject of our session today is on sourcing and how to be more successful in sourcing. So both Steve and Sophie have worked with many clients over the years, getting sourcing practices up and running, getting sourcing technology up and running. So we have a bit of an insider's guide to talk you through how to get the most out of your sourcing practice. So the things we're going to cover today, we'll do some quick introductions, both from a personal perspective, but also in terms of who our companies are. So who are Xoomworks, who are IASTA, and what do we do? Then we'll kick off by talking about some of the common questions and problems that we come across when we're working with people trying to set up or trying to optimize their sourcing practices. Following on from that, we'll go into some detail on the 5 components which we feel make a successful sourcing practice. There's time for questions and answers at the end, and we'll summarize as well. So some quick introductions. As I've said, my name's Simon Hurst. I'm a solutions consultant at Xoomworks. I have a number of years, around 5 years experience in procurement, P2P, implementing technologies, and now I'm working with our new clients to determine what are the best solutions and how we can help them most. Do you want to introduce yourself, guys?
Hi guys, I'm Steve Orkett. I'm a senior consultant at Xoomworks. I've worked for about 13 years now in the procurement area, so it's mainly in project management and consultancy across sourcing and P2P parts of procurement business. Delivered over 100 auctions. That's a personal experience of mine, and it's across public and private sector as well. So that's where I am.
Good. Hi guys, I'm Sophie. For those of you who don't know, I actually work for IASTA, Select a Good Company, and I've got over 10 years procurement experience. So my experience mainly is from actually as a practitioner. I ran supply chains for a number of years, so I've definitely got experience from the procurement professional side of things. I've worked for IASTA on the technology provision, managing deployments for large-scale sourcing programs for the last 2-3 years. I've managed a number of deployments across sourcing technology and supporting modules as well. So definitely helped a lot of clients go through what can be a bit of a daunting process when it comes to implementing sourcing technology, with some great success, I might add.
Thank you very much, Sophie. So moving on to who we are. First of all, from a Xoomworks perspective, we're a procurement consultancy. We've been in operation for around 15 years, and we operate across EMEA. We've got offices in the UK, in France, Romania, and more recently South Africa. And we're really focused on procurement expertise right across the process, from the sourcing process right through to the more procure-to-pay and invoicing process. In terms of what we do, we've laid it out on the screen here. You can broadly break it down into 3 areas. So first of all, we sell and we implement procurement solutions, so IASTA solutions and other technologies. And that's we've had some really notable success in that regard. In the stat there is with regards to P2P, so from an electronic invoicing perspective and approving working capital, that's some of the big successes we've had. In terms of the next thing that we do, so more optimization or transformation of procurement functions. And what we're talking about here is really taking people's use of technology and overlaying the more behavioral side of things. So how are people working with that technology? What's their relationships between procurement and the business? And really then getting the most out of the technology that you've implemented. And finally, more from an operational support perspective, we do a number of things in this area. So we can support people's technology in terms of help desk support. but also more and more, which is the topic of this webinar, is around running and supporting people's sourcing practices, whether that's through simple e-auctions or more complicated RFP processes and category management and upskilling the category teams within our customers. So that's a quick overview of who we are and what we do. Sophie, do you want to tell us about IASTA?
Sure, I will tell you about IASTA. So IASTA, as you can see, a select company. Traditionally, IASTA has been focused on the technology and support of upstream procurement technology. So we have been around for over 10 years, and we've got a huge amount of experience in sourcing technology, supplier management, contract management, and also supplier performance management technology and the service and support thereof, and obviously spend, which is a huge part of our business, which we're going to talk about a bit today. We actually joined forces with Selectica. Traditionally, the product scope they develop and support is enterprise contract lifecycle management, which has made a really good marriage actually between our product sets. We have also, excitingly, will be soon to announce the completion of the joint relationship with BPAC as well, who produce P2P technology. So that's basically going to give us entire end-to-end technology and support for the whole sourcing process, upstream and downstream. We have headquarters in San Francisco. We've got a European headquarters here in London, which is where we're broadcasting to you today from. And we actually support our clients across multiple different time zones all over the world. So we'll learn a bit more about the technology as we go through this piece, but I think that's it in a nutshell.
Lovely, thanks Sophie. So why are we here today? What are we talking about? So we, as we've just outlined, worked with many different customers implementing technology, optimizing technology, and so on. And these are some of the more common questions and concerns that we come across. We don't need to talk through all of those, but just to give you a flavour. And what we feel is that by addressing some of these questions, you can become a more successful sourcing function. So what's the impact of successful sourcing? So are you one of the top performing organisations who are, for example, achieving 4 times more savings than other organisations? Are you managing more spend, up to 95% of the organisation's spend? Are you reducing your sourcing cycle times by implementing and optimising technology? And also, are you attracting and keeping the right people within procurement to make you successful? Or are you falling behind? Do you have a lack of commitment within the business? Have you got no clear strategy on how to engage either the stakeholders in the business or your suppliers, in fact? Can you get good quality spend data out of the system, or are you using a lot of Excel and not really knowing what it is that you're buying across the organisation? Are you relying upon people in terms of their tendering and negotiation skills, which are often weak? And finally, are you really not managing much of the organisation's spend? Are the organisation off doing what they want to without procurement's input, without you being able to optimise the spend for the organisation? So in terms of becoming a top performing organisation, we feel there are 5 pillars or 5 factors, let's say, that will help you on that journey to starting to become successful. So that's what we're going to talk about in some detail now. So what those are, we feel, are first of all brand and vision. So having a strong brand for procurement and a vision for where procurement's going, and we'll talk more around the importance of aligning that with the business's vision. How are you structured within procurement to maximise your interaction with suppliers, to maximise your interaction with the business, and to basically get the most out of the company's spend? How effective are you at managing your stakeholders, interacting with your stakeholders, so that procurement are at the table is often a common phrase, in the deals that matter right at the start rather than just negotiating a contract. And as I mentioned on the last slide, employees, you're only going to be a successful procurement function if you've got the right people in place with the right skills and the right tools to do the job. So how can you manage your employees effectively? And then finally, from a technology perspective, so technology will really underpin all of those points, but how can you get the most out of the technology that you've implemented? So let's go through those one by one, and Sophie and Steve will give their opinions on how to be successful in these different areas. So first of all, brand and vision. So what we really mean here is around having a direction for procurement, and what we feel is that aligning that direction with the business's direction is absolutely crucial. So there's no point procurement sitting in a silo thinking about what they want to do, how can they be successful if it doesn't meet the needs of the business. Procurement is there to service the business at the end of the day. So understanding the business is non-negotiable. Moving on from that, Steve, maybe you can talk us through a few points. Why is it so important that you engage with the business when you're developing your brand and vision?
Well, I think first of all, it's really just important to reinforce, like we said there, having a strong brand and vision is pretty essential for the perception of procurement, both internally with your stakeholders and business units, but also externally with the suppliers. So I think it's more about making the existence of the department not just about hard cost savings, it's about actually becoming a business advisor within the organisation. Mm-hmm. So engagement's absolutely essential there, because we can actually, by addressing that, engaging with our business, we can find out what business value actually means. Yeah. Exactly. So we're talking more about cross-functional conversations to actually define what our ultimate mission statement is.
Who are your customers within the organisation, and what do they want from you? What does value mean to them?
Absolutely.
And once you've nailed that, you can understand where you should be driving your department.
Absolutely. I think it's really important to set that up as a point of reference. Once we have that point of reference, we've then got a number of objectives that we can set up, again, both internally and externally, to almost put these enshrine these into a business plan for procurement. Mm-hmm. So what we can then do is have, for example, internal objectives, which could be adoption of toolkits, standardization, how much measurable processes we've got there. Yeah. That's our internal lever. And externally, what's our customer service like? Are we delivering on that mission statement and business plan that we've set up? So I think that document and that planning that we talked about secondly there is absolutely essential to keep referring back to that and changing as we go on.
Yeah.
And Sophie, obviously the next element is in terms of reporting this out. How do you do this? How do you get the message out to the business?
So I think exactly what Steve has said is about changing the image of procurement within an organisation, and to do that you need to communicate. So you need to communicate what your vision is, what the KPIs are that you've set, and whether you've actually achieved them. So within the IAS tool, we do have I'm just going to show you a little video here. This is a very high-level overview of our spend analytics tool. So how do you create your KPIs? How do you know what you're aiming for when you're looking at your direction for the department? Well, you need to base those decisions on real-life facts. And with our tool, you can take all of your information or your spend data from lots of sources, lots of systems, and you can cleanse it and understand it so that you can make intelligent business decisions based on that real data. Once you've got this, obviously we can integrate that with what's going on a sourcing level, and you can share that information with very, very little admin and no kind of pouring through spreadsheets, and you can share that with the top management and other stakeholders in the business so that they know what you're doing and they know that you're achieving success in those defined areas.
And that's a really, really important point to make, really, because of these mission statements we set up, these objectives objectives and actually setting up those KPIs, that's all well and good. If we don't actually tell
anyone
people about that,
exactly,
then we're missing the trick there.
And all of these tools are now fully web supported, so you can actually do shared hosting sessions for people who don't have access to the tool themselves. You can use snapshot technology to share particular graphs. So all of these views are actually custom defined. We work with you during the implementation to understand what your KPIs are and how you want to see your data displayed. And then, you know, as you go through, you can actually see from the video here that all of this data is fully dynamic, so that you can interrogate what you're looking at any time. So you can keep an eye on what your KPIs are and how you're delivering them, and you can also feed that back into the business to make sure that you're still looking at the right things as the business evolves.
That's absolutely right. Your brand and vision might change. It needs to come with it.
It does. You need to keep your finger on the pulse of what actually is important to the business, and change your approach depending on
that and your KPIs. So
yeah,
I agree with that completely.
Okay, super. So just before we move on to the next section, if I can quickly summarise, I think a key thing here is listening to the business and not operating in silos. So determining what procurement stands for should be driven by what the business needs. Having a plan to deliver that vision is really important. So there's no point just having you know, a statement that says this is what we are. You have to talk about this is how we're going to do it and put a plan in place to do that. And from a technology perspective, you know, there are really some great tools, as we can see here from the IASTA perspective, to track and report the progress against those objectives, against that vision. So, okay, thank you guys.
I think being flexible as well is one of the things, because, you know, we can say, we've said this already, but being flexible to change, we don't have to enshrine that as a, you know, that's it, it's fixed. It's going to be an evolution, it's going to be a change, there could be changes, but as long as we're delivering back and we're monitoring that and we're putting that in our business plan.
And having real-time data to make those decisions on will increase your ability to react to what's going on. So you'll be able to spot trends early, and you'll be able to readjust your direction, so you're not working towards a goal that, you know, was relevant, you know, 3 years ago or whatever. Yeah, exactly. So you can see it just from the end of the video before we move on. This is a reporting dashboard that's basically showing all of your sourcing data across your organisation. So it keeps you informed of what you're doing, and you know, you can measure your success and share it very, very easily without any fuss and faff and spreadsheets.
No spreadsheets.
No
That's
spreadsheets,
what we like.
please.
Okay, super. So next point, organisation structure. So what we mean here is, you know, how can you be flexible in terms of aligning yourself with the business? So, you know, you get interaction with the business feels you're a trusted partner and is working with procurement actively. But also, how do you then balance that with any controls that you need from a procurement perspective? Because, you know, in the end, procurement, like it or not, has to control what the company's spending in some regard. So there's a bit of a balancing act here. So, Sophie, maybe you can kick us off. How can the technology help us understanding how your business is working, how you're aligned?
Yeah, so basically you've got to know what you're spending and where in order to make an informed decision about the structure that you'd like your department to take. So it's very important actually to appreciate where you're going to get economies of scale or benefit from specialization of a centrally led team, and where actually it makes more sense for you to devolve that responsibility to local or non-centralized areas of the business. So as I mentioned before about spend analytics, really understanding what it is that you're spending will help you to form that decision. So you can understand which categories you want to develop that specialized expertise, with retaining the flexibility to not over-engineer the process and to allow local purchasing teams to follow the same process. And actually that's a very important point that technology can bring as well, is that we're looking to standardize the process between the two different structures. So you need to have that control within a centrally led team, but you want to make sure that different procurement divisions aren't operating in silos, that they're sharing the knowledge, and you can do that a lot more efficiently with the use of technology by things like, you've got central repository for all your projects that go on. You create templates for RFX events. You've got access or visibility to terms and conditions and contracts that other departments have created. So you've got that knowledge share. You don't waste that developed expertise. You also have the opportunity then to view what's going on in your organization and see which areas actually are really doing well, and where you need to focus. So where your savings are coming from, and where you could benefit from, increasing the flow of communication between particular sections of the organisation, if you like.
Okay. And Steve, aside from the sort of centrally led, strategically led discussion, in terms of structure, what's the importance of aligning procurement with the business?
So I think we've talked about it already, that the really important exercise is, as Sophie said, the segmentation. I think a rigorous spend analytics approach to segment your categories then leads to those, the right decisions being made to get our standardization set up. In answer to the question, alignment's really important because, again, we mentioned about procurement operating as a silo, and that's not what we want. We want procurement to be, a fully functional, cross-functional team as part of, the overall business. So basically, by aligning procurement with the rest of the business, we reinforce our importance, really. Our image. It goes back to brand and vision again. So it's really important. I think what it also does is provides a clarity of roles. So with procurement engaged at the correct time in the process and operating as one business team, we ensure that everybody knows what they're doing and when. So it minimises that risk that you've probably seen countless times over and over of a buyer getting to a point where the stakeholder produces a spec, asks the procurement team to sign off the spec, there's been no input up to that point. How do you influence that? So it can minimise that risk. And likewise, at the end of the kind of process, I've seen it many times where, effectively procurement is just signing the contract. So it needs to, I think alignment's so important to get everybody involved early in the business.
Yeah, so I completely agree. What we're looking at on screen now is basically just a snapshot of our sourcing analytics dashboard. Now, this basically allows you to see what's going on. So where we've mentioned about making the right decisions driven from your spend data, you've also got the opportunity to keep an eye on what kind of projects are going on within your sourcing division. Are you strategically controlling, are you getting involved in that spend, or a good proportion of that spend? Who is generating these projects? You can see here on the bottom left-hand corner, you've got projects broken down by project owner. So where are these projects being run? What kind of categories are they being run on? And that kind of gives you an idea of, how much control have you got? Are you genuinely maximising the use of that organisation structure where you've got specialised knowledge within particular category management areas, and is that understanding being transferred to the other parts of the procurement function? And a use of version controlled templates will allow people to do that really quickly, but stick to the same process, which is quite often the number 2 thing that clients want from us when they ask, or when we ask them why they want to implement sourcing technology. It's standardization across the department and understand everyone's doing the same thing.
Just out of interest, Sophie, what's the number 1 reason?
Savings.
Generally. Of course, very good.
Well, no, it's because they want to work with me usually, so I think that's another one.
Of course. Okay, so just before we move on, a quick summary. I think first of all, using technology to understand what's being bought where in the organisation helps you understand what the organisation looks like in terms of a spend profile, and allows you to align your category management team or your category management structure with the business. Another point I really like there is around using the technology and standardization of templates, processes, and so on to support whatever kind of model that you want, whether it's centrally, strategically led, devolved, however you want to set yourself up. Using that technology to support that is really useful. And then finally, and importantly as well, make sure you're meeting the needs of the business by aligning yourself with the way that they're structured, so that you're at the table when you need to be, at the right point in the deals. Okay, next point. So stakeholder management. What's this all about? Really, what we're talking about is engaging with both the business and suppliers, and this really follows on from brand and vision quite closely, I suppose. It's more the execution of that brand and vision. It's really about getting people bought into what procurement are doing, and working with procurement when they need to. So, Steve, maybe you can kick us off. What are the first steps in successfully managing your stakeholders?
Well, I think it's it's a pretty simple thing. First of all, it's really just identifying who your
they
stakeholders are.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So
and you'd be surprised at how many people don't actually do this.
Absolutely.
That's right, isn't it?
I think that's the key thing. I think it's a case of how important the departments regard this, and I think sometimes it can be lost, especially if you get engaged at the wrong time. Again, it's one of the first things that could fall off the table.
Yeah.
So I think actually using that methodical kind of model of identifying who those users are, and that could be users amongst your business relationships, so it's your technical teams, your legal teams, health and safety, anyone who's basically involved in producing a tender. Also your supplier relationships, very important, so making sure they're on the radar in terms of stakeholder engagement. And then finally executive sponsors, so buy-in. Basically everybody who's involved in your project needs to be assessed in some kind of way. The second point on there, as I said, is assessment. So that's actually really a sort of engagement matrix that we can put together, plotting importance and influence of the stakeholders.
Just don't show them how important you think they are.
Absolutely, yeah. It's all kind of secret stuff that you're going to be using as a kind of a weapon in your armory for the processes. So I think by plotting those on there, I think what we then get is a good profile of kind of who the influential people are, who the people with great interest are, and likewise who are those with low influence and low interest, and then we can almost we know from those traits and from that profile where they sit in a matrix. So I think that's really important.
So there's
to do that exercise.
So there's some theory behind this, really, in terms of plotting where those stakeholders sit, but I guess ultimately it's about getting out there and talking to people as well.
Getting out there and doing it and actually formalising the process, because ultimately our aim is to move those people from that level of kind of apathy, if you like, to one of importance and understanding.
Okay, and Sophie, I think obviously communication is a big part of this. How do you balance the what to communicate, when to communicate, frequency, and so on?
Yeah, I think this is a really, really good point, because let's not pretend that everyone wants to be involved in the sourcing process all the time. What you've got with technology is the opportunity to define that process and control it. And I always find that if you understand who your stakeholders are, and you really plot out not just what the influence they have on the process is, but when you want them to get involved or when they want to be involved in the process, this is a key. This is of key importance when you're controlling the process itself. So I've got a little video here, one that I prepared earlier, which is basically looking at several key aspects of getting key stakeholder involvement at the right time. So if you look at the end-to-end sourcing process, we start off with suppliers. Now, Steve mentioned there that the importance of getting suppliers bought in, and that should never be underestimated, specifically when you're embarking on e-sourcing technology or implementation of sourcing technology for the first time. You need to get your suppliers onboarded, and to do that, it needs to be as user-friendly as clear from the supplier's point of view as possible. You need to get them to buy into the process. Otherwise, you can't have an auction, for example, without anyone getting involved.
With your suppliers.
So initially, you've got your stakeholder management from your supplier side. You've then got, directed and controlled specific involvement of key stakeholders within the business. So, for example, you can dictate the level of input for particular departments in scoring your RFP responses. So you may want to direct health and safety department to look at a particular section of your RFP. You may want them to score that, but you don't want them to see everything to do with that RFP. You certainly may not want them to view the commercials. So, technology gives you the platform to be able to control who gets involved at what point. And it really gives procurement the power to dictate that process so that everyone is comfortable that they're invited at the right time, the process is well thought out, and they have been considered, but they don't need to be involved in every step of the way. Following on from the sourcing process, then, you'll also have contract lifecycle management where instead of chasing, a dog-eared document from desk to desk, you can electronically control the workflow so that each of the key stakeholders gets sign-off. It goes in the right order, and it all is subject to specific created workflows based on rules, such as, every contract over 50 grand must be signed off by the CEO. If it involves the procurement of, something to do with health and safety, then it involves the health and safety executive as well. So contract management, you can have involvement at the right time and they have faith in the process, right the way through to managing what goes on after the contract is implemented. So your suppliers need to be performing to the KPIs as defined in the contract. Are they meeting their SLAs? We have the functionality to be able to measure the performance of the suppliers and get stakeholder feedback from different parts of the business in terms of how those suppliers are doing. So really, this piece for us is about, yes, understanding who they are, yes, map out how important they are to the process and where they need to feature, but give them the technology to be able to quickly and directly access the areas of interest that they need to be involved in, and not bog them down with information that they, quite frankly, don't really care about. So,
and I guess one of the advantages there that you can see from the system is communication. So you can, tailor your communications out of the system to make sure
and
stakeholders
you can automate a lot of it as well. So you've got notifications or reminders to go out to suppliers. It can take the admin away from you so that actually you don't constantly have to think, oh, I need to get that person involved, late on in the process. When it's defined in the system for you with specific roles and responsibilities that that can be defined, it kind of takes away the pressure because they get involved when they have to and they're happy with their input. So
I think it's it's almost like a mini sales exercise for procurement if you think about stakeholder management in its purest way, because all we're trying to do really is maximize the quick wins, so spread good news, but also minimise not including people in the process.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, it's all, again, it's that, perception.
Yeah,
again,
exactly, and exactly as Simon mentioned in the intro, this does link closely with brand and vision, because giving, the platform and the organised approach to your sourcing practice gives your stakeholders the faith, really, that you know what you're doing and they'll be involved at the right time, and actually they will be involved when they need to be. So you can become that trusted partner in the organisation.
Okay, thanks, Sophie. I think you summed that up pretty
sorry,
nicely.
did I steal your summary?
No, that's great. I think really going back to what Steve originally said, stakeholder management, really the purpose of it is around getting the right people on board with sourcing, buying into it, but also participating in it, and understanding their influence and where they should be involved is key to communicating effectively with them. And then, as you've just been alluding to, really use technology to help automate that involvement of stakeholders, get them involved at the right point, and use the tool to help you with that. Okay, so on to the next point, employee management. So what we really mean here is, as it says there, it's about attracting and retaining the right staff that are going to make you a successful procurement function. Giving them the right tools so they've got the right behaviours to interact with the business and your suppliers, in fact. So, Steve, I think the first point here is an interesting one. Maybe you can elaborate on it. Why do you think that category planning is such an important part, or how can it be used to develop people?
I think it's really important in the sense that it gives that empowerment to procurement experts. You know, category managers having their own, almost their own responsibility for that business. If it was their own company, almost that feeling of empowerment to run their category like their own business. And I think that kind of enthusiasm can be transferred quite easily to the rest of the buying team, and help keep morale at that level where everybody feels empowered. You know. I think the segmentation that comes with that as well. So a category planning process, a great approach to that process, ensures that all of the tasks that are undertaken by the procurement team in that category are wholly relevant to that particular function. So, for example, you may have some areas of business that are very much tactical parts of procurement. Therefore, the tasks that are involved in that may be more administrative, but you know you're not getting bogged down by that because they're essential for that particular category. Likewise, if it's strategic, the functions you'll be doing there are again aligned with what we've said in the category planning exercise, and it's segmented that way. So ultimately the end goals are supporting the business, and I think the key there is that ultimate goal really of ensuring that everybody's day job ultimately reinforces our mission statement. Exactly, so it's almost like an autopilot thing, that it makes everybody's job better on a day-to-day basis, but we're supporting that overall kind of end goal. I think that's quite important.
Okay, I think obviously development is a huge part of how you manage your employees. Sophie, can the technology itself or even the software providers support this?
Yeah, absolutely. From an employee management point of view, you're really talking about two phases, specifically when you're implementing technology into a new organisation for the first time. So the important thing is actually to give your people the right support they need. So not just bringing in the technology and then saying, there you go, just fit that into your day job and add it to everything else that you're doing. It's about understanding what their workload is and giving them the right support with this new skill that we're asking them to learn. So that can cover anything from 24-hour a day, 5 days a week support over all time zones, which we do at IASTA. Hello. And you need to give them that instant human contact, especially when it comes to technology. You've got online help guides. You've got formal training, informal training. What we tend to see work really well at our clients, at more clients, is the cultivation of this best practice centre approach. So you really want to cultivate knowledge within the organisation itself. So it's important to understand, yes, you've got that link to the technology provider, so your procurement professionals know how to use it. They can pick up the phone, they can email, they can find out where do I click to do X, Y, Z. But you also need to develop that coaching and mentoring approach to specific key users within the organisation so that they can share the knowledge amongst their own staff, their own colleagues. And once you get that initial support, what we find with continued support or continued adoption is the proof is in the pudding. So yes, give them the support they need to adopt it, continue to support, coach and develop them as a best practice centre within the organisation so they can share knowledge internally. But really, to get people to continue to use this kind of technology and get the best out of it, you need to show them where the value is added to their everyday lives, so where their jobs are made easier by use of this technology. And that harks back to, you know, the automation, giving them the opportunity to track their own savings, so making their job easier as they go, and they'll see the benefits themselves, and then want to continue to develop with that use of that technology.
Super, thanks, Sophie. So we've got quite a number of questions coming through actually, so we'll get through this last section and then open up some questions. Just to quickly move on to technology then. We've talked about technology throughout really, and you know, that's been interspersed with all of the things we've talked about, but this section really is about getting the most out of your investment in technology. So how are you getting that return on investment? Steve, maybe you could start us off. So what, in your experience, what does a good approach to implementing and adopting technology look like?
Okay, so I think that we've got a number of exercises really that starts with a kind of spend and analytics approach.
Yeah.
So Sophie's mentioned it before, and we've seen a bit about the technology, but ultimately seeing what you're spending, how much and with who, really just is the start point for anything that you do with that technology. I think moving
that you can't do without, basically.
Absolutely, and I think that again, it's all about great use of technology is all about maximising that return on investment. So if you've got a product in there, use all of the tools available, and that's absolutely starts with the spend analytics approach. Once we've got that, once we know what we're doing in that kind of realm, then identifying opportunities moving forward is absolutely essential, because then we can kind of leverage those opportunities either by making changes to the contract, you know, cutting down on duplicate purchasing exercises, and also then sourcing.
I think what we've seen also, I mean, you know, not to make it sound too simple, but actually putting the technology in itself, especially sourcing technology, is relatively straightforward.
Yeah.
But actually, if you use that implementation to actually start pulling together a sourcing roadmap, then you're really off to a flying start as soon as you get going.
I mean, some people often ask me, you know, when's the best time to put your sourcing pipeline together, and I'll just say immediately. It doesn't matter whether you've got the technology or you haven't even signed the deal yet. You need to know. You need to have a plan for your sourcing technology, and we can help you put that together. I know Xoomworks, that's something that you do as well. So you can get help with, okay, what kind of categories do we need to look at? What give us the best results? Where will I get the most impact for my you know, for my time spent, basically.
Bang for your buck.
Bang for my buck.
So that obviously gives us our pipeline, right?
Penny for my pound.
So our pipeline's there, and then obviously after that, I think it's all well and good having a pipeline and a number of opportunities to actually execute, but it's actually how we execute them as well. So again, in a technology tool, we've got a number of methods to actually automate. So, you know, we're talking here things like scoring and weighting in the system, which reduces the evaluation timelines.
Yeah, so exactly. This is about not just taking your existing process and whacking it in a tool. You know, you have to adapt what you're doing to fit the online process. So you don't want to be uploading reams and reams of spreadsheets, because it's not making the most of the tools that you have. So again, with spend analysis, you can't do some of the stuff on your own. Basically, there's just no way. But you can't. You also have the option to automate some of the process, so you cut down evaluation time, so that you can direct your suppliers so they give you the answers in the format that you need. You've also got technology then to run e-auctions, which obviously you couldn't do without. So you're understanding the process and streamlining it to the new technology that you've got. And then obviously you continue to adopt the technology as you go through by kind of getting some quick wins first, gaining momentum, and developing your pipeline as you go.
Well, we've actually, it's probably now's a good idea to pull in some of the questions actually. Yeah. So we've got one specifically on adoption. Thanks for submitting the question. So they've asked, can you tell us a little about any issues that you have encountered in the adoption of technology and how you would overcome them?
Oh, nice. Do you know the biggest problem that I think we have to adoption is that understanding, actually is perfect timing, understanding that the process changes. So you've got your existing process, you may have your 6-step sourcing methodology, you're so used to working with spreadsheets. The biggest difference is getting your head around the new functionality that you have with a sourcing platform that you didn't have before. And I find that actually leads on to the number one kind of pause or delay in a sourcing process, or in generating success of a sourcing implementation process, is that our clients quite often aren't actually ready. They want to have more time to understand and revamp their process so they streamline, which is really important because that's what we're here for. We're here to guide you through that process. But if I could sum it up to the biggest kind of hurdle, it's making that shift in your mind between having a process on paper and traditional manual processes for running RFXs to understanding what you can achieve with the functionality of the technology that you didn't have before.
So another thing I'd want to quickly add there in terms of issues and solutions to problems you might get in an adoption is kind of good training, relevant training. So doing the training.
Well, we don't have that problem because we've got excellent training.
Of course,
so.
naturally. But another thing, clearly that's an issue of making sure that you've got everybody trained up on the system.
Provision for good training as well. It's not something that should be an afterthought for the process. It should be.
It's all about the whole holistic kind of adoption thing, not the one-time cost. About actually putting.
Continue to training it, absolutely.
And I actually think the last point, just quickly before we move on, I know we're short for time, is actually having internal KPIs to measure that adoption. So if you don't have that, then you don't know how many amount of times I've seen people not actually using the system. So having that KPI, seeing how many RFX you're running, for example, is a great metric.
So I think also is one of the points that we touched on there. I've found that to be really useful, is that you, as part of the implementation, bring people in to identify that roadmap and get them going as soon as you launch the
absolutely. Don't be
launch
scared
the products.
of it.
So or even use them as test events and so on. So that, we find that really helpful. So still on technology, Sophie, this is more around the end-to-end process. So how does the technology support the end-to-end sourcing process?
Yeah, so I think this video is basically just showing us, the importance of an integrated approach to your strategic sourcing process. So I know at IASTA we have been hugely focused on developing the technology so that it gives you a streamlined approach to these processes. So things like moving data from your supplier onboarding profiles, where suppliers can actually register themselves with your system, obviously requiring some sign-offs and whatnot. But it really takes away the admin of you having to upkeep your supplier databases. Feeding that information through to RFX or RFP projects, where you can automate the response in terms of how 300 suppliers do when asked to give their input in terms of capability of a sourcing event. That then feeds through to project award, so getting that information into the contract when you implement the award itself, and then continually monitoring. So what you can do online is give your department a centralized repository that's integrated, so it takes into account each of the stages of the sourcing process. And that's what technology can do, whereas traditionally you've got a segmented approach with bits of information everywhere, different people running different processes. It gives you a one-stop kind of shop to how best to run your processes.
Okay, and finally, just before we get to the questions, where do you see technology going in the future?
Yeah, so I kind of touched a little bit on it there. I mean, the importance here is we've talked at each of these key points about what your strategy should be concerning each of these areas. Now, your strategy when it comes to technology is not just, as Steve said, a one-hit initiative. It has to be a continued adoption, and you continually have to keep abreast of what's happening in the technology industry, or you don't. You have to partner with someone who does. And the important thing for me, or the important thing that I find actually, is that your solutions provider needs to understand where technology is going. So the technology is going to change to support the needs of your changing business. The areas that we think are going to be more and more important to the technology industry is actually focusing on the supplier as an important part of the life cycle. We want to have a collaborative process, not just a one-way street where you dictate terms and conditions to your suppliers. It needs to be a fully interactive, a two-way street when it comes to information. And we also want each of the elements of the sourcing cycle to be integrated, so you're not duplicating effort, and you can streamline the process, take away all the admin. And lastly, putting the intelligence back, so giving clients and procurement professionals the right information at their fingertips for them to be able to make intelligent decisions based on that information.
So I guess this is all stuff around, I guess, tablet devices, mobile apps, that kind of stuff, I guess, would it?
Yeah, I mean, whatever platform you want to use it on. It's basically got to adapt to current day. So it's got to be where we can use technology to support what we're doing, so that people don't have to spend loads of time doing non-value add activities like pouring through spreadsheets.
I guess I've seen sort of a lot of.
Well, maybe now's a good time to come on to some of the questions, because we've got quite a lot pouring through. As you were talking about sort of different communication channels there, maybe we can just touch on one of those questions. So, how has collaboration and communication changed over the past years? Are you seeing more and more demand for using social media capabilities in sourcing tools?
I'd certainly say yes. I think there's much more of a demand for almost optimized dashboards on tablet devices.
Yeah.
So data on the go, that kind of stuff. Would you say that's?
Yeah, definitely. And we're getting a lot more call for we talked about stakeholder management. So if you've got a CPO who wants to sign off a contract, we need to do it on the go. We need to do it on a fully web-supported platform. You don't want desktop downloads. You just want basically instant access from anywhere, basically, where you can sign off a contract, or feedback on valuation of a scorecard or RFP responses. You want to be able to to do it on the go. And I think it does also go back to the integrated point that I was talking about with technology. So it's not just about one source of data. We're talking about collaborating. We all have heard about the use of big data and how much information is out there. But it's really about giving an integrated platform. So you've not only got your internal communication systems, your spend data, etc., your PO, P card, AP data, but you've also got feeds from external sources like Dun & Bradstreet, like other software providers that give you a holistic view of your supply base. So you can actually feed in various pieces of information to give you a full view of what's going on in your sourcing organisation.
I really like that part of the question about social media as well, because that's something that certainly in the last few years has become much more kind of important, and we've talked a lot about communication and sending that message out. So I think it's highly relevant, that part of the question.
And from a technology perspective, it comes back to being able to integrate with those platforms.
Absolutely.
Okay, next question. I think we've probably got time for two more. A chicken or egg question. So would you recommend implementing sourcing as part of a transformation project, or should you transform first and then implement the technology?
So I think, do you mind if I start off on that? So I think that from what I've seen very often, I think technology can often lead the way.
Yeah.
It almost becomes a vehicle for that change. The beauty of it is it enables you to actually look at what your processes are, cut out the processes that are superfluous to what you actually need, and then refine and kind of make a more streamlined kind of model of business. So from my perspective, I think it's a really great way, a good vehicle to make that change.
Yeah.
I don't see why we can't do it at the same time, but I do think that technology can lead the way.
Yeah, I agree actually, and I think that you know, like we mentioned in the first point about brand and vision, and making sure that you align your objectives with the organisation, but also base them on data. Now, where's this transformation project being driven from? What decisions are you making? What are you going for when you want to achieve that transformation? What are your goals and objectives? Now, it's important to be able to measure those, and it's important to be able to report back on success, or how else do you know you've transformed. You know, so actually, I see that technology is really goes hand in hand with that transformation, and it gives you the capability to not only report but to understand where you're going, and that's you know, probably one of the most important things. So you set your goals, and technology will allow you to monitor your progress on them, and you don't have to then spend ages poring over spreadsheets and measure your activity. You know, this is something that can be built and tweaked as you go. But I think it's important to lay the ground rules in, you know, in what you want to achieve on data.
Okay, I think let's take two more questions. Someone's written here, they're on the page with us, so they say the benefit of technology is clear, but it can only be realised when all of your spend data is merged, channeled together in one hub or spend analytics tool. But can this happen in a complex organisation where various interests may conflict? So can technology help you to resolve a complex organisation to get good spend data?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, do you mind if I take that?
Go for it.
We've had, you know, we've had actually very, very successful implementations with companies that are going through huge mergers. So exactly that challenge where you've got not only 4 or 5 different sources of data within one organisation, but you suddenly have 2 or 3 organisations that want to merge those sources of data as well. So yes, you want to go for you want to get hold of a lot of spend, but actually the success of a sourcing implementation doesn't rely on getting 100% of your spend data in there. You know, there are still really good benefits from implementing sourcing, you know, if you know a good chunk of it. So the original question about whether it can, you know, deal with kind of conflicting interests, well, absolutely, because, you know, how do you base your decisions, whether you're, whichever, you know, direction your decisions come from, you need to base them on fact. Otherwise, you know, you're never going to resolve any kind of, you know, interpretation of what's going on. You need to look at the numbers and work out, you know, what the facts actually are. And as I said, you know, you can actually take all of that data from various sources and merge it in, and we would actually do that for you, and implement sourcing without a full composition of your spend data. So you've still got the benefits of you know, reduction of your cycle time or sourcing cycle time. You've still got administrative benefits. You've got actually you've got harmonization of your staff. You've got a central repository. You know, you've got time-saving functionality so that everyone's following the same project management templates. You know, this kind of tool lends itself to knowledge sharing and having, you know, central processes, which actually is the first step in kind of harmonizing different well, when you have a conflict of interest in terms of what you want to achieve.
Okay, let's take one more question before we wrap up. What is your advice for convincing suppliers to participate in online projects when they might initially be reluctant?
Sophie, do you mind if I start off, or should we both
off.
Have a go at that one?
Go on.
Okay,
yeah,
great.
Well, and then I'll fill in the gaps.
Yeah, cool.
1 minute, guys.
All right, within 1 minute. Okay, so first of all, I'd say that it's easier to submit RFX. So there's a clear audit trail of the supplier submitting, when they did it, any changes they've made to it. So that in terms of admin, I think it's an easier way of submitting a response.
Yeah.
On the flip side of that, you're going to get quicker feedback.
Yeah,
obviously
absolutely.
the timelines and the life cycle is shortened by submitting RFX. And the last thing I can think of, and you probably can fill in the gaps, is certainly when you go to auctions, you get immediate market feedback.
Exactly.
So it's a great position of where you are visibility-wise.
That's a big one. It is instant feedback. How many times when I was a buyer initially would I, have the response that, oh well, if I'd have known you'd gone a couple of quid cheaper, then I would have come down again. So they do get instant feedback of the commercials. They also know that it's a fair process. Actually, this sometimes is shown as a, is a barrier to supplier onboarding or getting involved in the projects. But actually, they know that all of the information and the same information has gone out to all of the suppliers at the same time because it's all automated. So everyone has the same chance and everyone has the same opportunity to come back with questions. So it's a fair process. And I think the important thing, just before we close off on this, is conditioning of your suppliers is not removed by the fact that you have technology. You still need to have relationships and you need to cultivate those relationships. So early involvement, as I spoke about earlier, conditioning them so that they know what's coming up in the event, working with them so they're on board and giving them the opportunity to train, and again, that's something we can help you with. So all of these things are actually a massive benefit for the suppliers, because ultimately they suddenly get visibility of a bigger slice of the pie because you can run more sourcing projects and you can open it up to more of the supply base. So they can have visibility of spend that they probably didn't even know you were spending, and you've got the option to increase your competition in those areas as well. So it's win-win. Hooray! Is that 1 minute?
Way more than 1 minute. But
no, it wasn't.
Lovely. Thank you, guys. That's been really interesting. I think just one quick summary slide, and actually just to mention before we do that, any of the questions that we haven't answered, we'll come back to people offline after the session. So to summarize, I think if we look at what we've been talking about, I think we can break it down into two areas. So first of all, there are what we call the mechanics, the mechanical side of procurement. So having the right systems in place, putting robust processes in place that people know and understand, having good data and being able to report on that data to understand what you're spending, and also having an organisation structure that works for procurement and for the business. So these are more, they're things you need in place. They're enablers that are going to make sourcing and procurement successful. But I think what really takes you to the next level is thinking more about the behavioural side of your team and the way procurement works. So as we've discussed, setting up a brand and vision for procurement, which is very much aligned with the business, understanding your stakeholders, managing them, engaging with them, and really importantly as well, employee management. So having the right people on board, giving them the right skills, giving them the right tools, ensuring that they stay on board.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so thank you all very much for participating. There will be a recording available, and we can send the slides out afterwards. And as I said, we'll try to respond to any more questions. If you would like to find out more about either Xoomworks or IASTA, there are some details there. So you can email us, you can visit our website for both Xoomworks and IASTA. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.